Hey, Dennis, how's it going?
It's going great, Jared. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk to you. And I wanted to first start off by talking about your most popular social media post of all time. It's about tiramisu. I just checked about 5 minutes ago, and as of right now, it has 1,562 comments, which is crazy.
Yep.
I feel like there's so many things that are just summed up in that post, from a dessert from a different country to social media to your love of food. I just thought it was a great way to start out with. Do you remember that post and when you wrote it?
Oh my God, yeah. It was one of the earliest posts I ever wrote too. So I've gone back to it and adjusted it and taken new pictures because I love tiramisu. And when I started writing, my writing was not real good. My picture taking was not real good. And I kind of got involved with Google at a point, when I first started my career as a blogger. I was a chef. So, I mean, and I was blogging for my students. I had no idea I was going to become, a real life situation where I'm going to make money and be popular and things like that. But it kind of led into that. So tiramisu was something that I loved to eat. I was at restaurants and I had tried to make it, and I had this mental block about it for some reason, and I just couldn't quite get it right. And then one day I'm sitting there, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and all of a sudden I remembered an earlier lesson I'd had back when I was in my 20s, and realized what I was doing wrong with
What,
mixture.
what was that?
It was very simple. It was a matter of whipping the eggs in a double boiler and making a sabayon. And the Italian term is zablioni, but sabayon for French. And making that solidified the whole mixture, because without that, with raw eggs, you can whip them and you can get air into them. And a lot of people have issues with eating raw eggs. Number one, it's not like it was back, and even in the 70s, where you eat a raw egg, it was like Rocky. It was no big deal. Yeah, now you eat a raw egg, you're going to get salmonella. That's the fear. Although I buy all free range, free roaming is the word you're looking for, free roaming eggs with chickens that are allowed to be chickens on so much land, and eat bugs and whatever the heck else they do. So, and I think the eggs are less susceptible to
So,
salmonella.
was your block like not adding enough air or using a different type of egg
It's
or?
just, I was whipping it and I was machine whipping it, but it just wasn't holding up. So by making the sabayon and cooking it made it into more of a substance rather than just an ingredient. Okay, because you're whipping the eggs with sugar and it's cooking them, and as you're whipping them, the volume increases. So the volume, because of how you're molecularly changing the egg yolks at that point,
It's getting like crystallized and more firm.
yeah, it holds up. And then the other trick that I learned years ago was, when you whip cream, you take your time with it. Because you think back to the French used to do it all by hand. And it would take, 10 minutes to whip cream.
Yeah.
We have these mixers now. We put the cream in, we turn it on. A minute later, we have whipped cream, which is all well and good if you're going to eat it right then. But if you're going to let it sit for a while, it's going to break down because you hurried it so much. So my other method is, besides that, I whip the cream and I build it up slow. I let it take about 10 minutes, and the last couple of minutes are on a higher speed. But up to that point, it's just taking its time, like if I was whipping it by hand and going through the effort. So those two things changed the whole atmosphere of the tiramisu and made it more stable. I
Mm.
mean, I always tell people, they say, how long will it last? I said, well, it depends on how long it takes you to eat it. Uh, you know, we can be talking about 2 days, or we can be talking about 10 days, but it doesn't weep. It doesn't break down. And a lot of the other tiramisus I had made up to that point, just I would make them in glasses because I couldn't cut them. They were delicious. They were silky and smooth and wonderful, but you couldn't cut them. You couldn't make a regular classical tiramisu. And then
Yeah.
people are always stingy with the cream too. It's like, let me just put a little bit of cream in there, like, oh, the heck with that. Should have it nice thick layers of cream, because that's the best part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you began cooking, this was in 2009,
Yeah, that's
around
when I started
then,
my blog.
not when you began cooking, when you began the
Yeah,
blog, yeah.
yeah.
What motivated that decision? You throughout your social media content everywhere, I see this message and I'm hearing it right now that you really like seeing people smile at the end of a meal.
Oh, absolutely. That was the most joy I got out of my cooking career is I would actually go out into the dining room when I was done or when I had time. You know, somebody want to see the chef, and I'd be like, oh, right. But I'd go out there and I'd be really happy. But when I went out on my own and wandered around, you know, you wouldn't hear a lot of talk. If you didn't hear people talking, you did a good job.
Yeah.
Okay. That means they're concentrated on their food. So, you know, the fact that they were content, that they were happy, that they were smiling, that they were undoing their belts, you know, that meant I did a good job. And my last job was actually at a school.
With the girls who you made tiramisu for.
Yeah, that's where I it came back to me, and I taught them because they had asked about it. And I'm thinking, oh, I make it, but I don't make. And I went, and I'm sitting there thinking, and it was just all of a sudden, you know, an old lesson I had, like I said, from this Italian grandmother back in the '70s. But like, oh my God! And then I started thinking about it, and it was a floodgate for me. All these other memories came back and lessons that
Was
I had.
that your grandma or was
Yeah.
that were you in Italy? Were you traveling back then as well and you had learned this lesson in Italy
It
or
was an accidental meeting when I was wandering in my younger years and kind of lost and not sure what I was going to do. And in fact, I was sleeping on a park bench and she walked up with two coffees and said, "I've been waiting for you." And I went, "What?" You know? So we knew, she said she knew I was on my way, kind of a thing. It was like one of those things. And I did work on her house, and she was
wow.
older and just taught me all these other life lessons and cooking and abilities, and said, you know, it was food will talk to you if you listen to it. Food will tell you what it needs if you let it. You know, that's where all my life is. Like, I was not a classically trained chef. I mean, I went to school and I have a degree in food science, but I didn't go to a culinary school. It was things that I learned and things that food taught me along the way.
Kind of
So
like the tiramisu.
yeah, and you know, if you listen to something, it will tell you what it wants or what it needs. If you know, you need a background. You can't just be completely ignorant of ingredients and not know things. But you know, if you know what ingredients you have, what ingredients do, what spices do, or what flavors do, when you look at it, when you smell it, when you see it, when you feel it, when you
Hmm,
taste it, it goes, oh, it wants this. It wants this. It wants this. You know, to make it. Like, I had never cooked Thai or Indian food before. I had no clue. But when I made it, I decided on what it told me it wanted, what spices, and the people were going, oh, this is really good. I'm like, okay. I was wondering what it was supposed to taste like because I'd never eaten it. You know, kind of.
That's funny that you were able to make it just from that connection, that
Yeah.
back and forth communication with food.
So I mean, it's people think sometimes you're crazy, but you know, it's like it really is. It's like anything else. It's like building something. If you build something, if you look at it, it's going to tell you where it needs to go and what it needs to do. It's anything you do, writing a song, you know, any type of work that you're really good at, an artist.
Totally. It's
It'll
like
lead.
it becomes your intuition, whether
Yeah.
it's accumulated experience or some like actual connection or whatever. Yeah.
So
I'm
that's been
hearing
my
this like
saving.
tremendous passion for food and I love it. And I know like it started at a young age for you. I wanted to go back in time to a story about a redfish. Do you remember that story? It's you have this gigantic fish, and then in the article you mentioned that you used to fish as a teenager. Like I just get this sense of you being really connected to where your food came from. You continue to buy food in local markets today. What was your like connection with food? Let's start off with the redfish, but like in general, your childhood.
Well, the redfish was something I had not fished in decades. My father used to take us out. It was one of his great joys that he would do, and he would take us out fishing. And we almost never caught anything, but when we did, you know, it was a nice day out kind of a thing. And the redfish, you know, they made me work for that fish, catching them. And when I did catch it, it turned out to be, I don't know if you read it, a half an inch too long. So we had to put
Way
it
too
back.
long.
Yeah. Well, it was a
Oh, the regulations.
it was a breeder, and and it was only when he took his finger and pushed the tail down that it became. Now I'd already caught a grouper, a good size grouper, and I had like a regular pole for that for the redfish. He gave me like something he picked up at a department store for a kid because it was so light, and he's going reel, and the reels bending, and it's like, oh, what the hell do you think I'm doing? I'm pulling up, right? It was the epic, the old man in the sea kind of. It only lasted about 5 minutes, but for me, it was a lifetime flashing before me as I'm going around the boat and the fish is fighting, and then we caught it. And like I said, when anything over a certain length was a breeder and had to go back. Now I was disappointed, but very happy for his integrity at
Mm,
the same time. And I had already caught a grouper, and it was way more fish than I was going to eat anyway, so that was fine. Yeah.
absolutely. And when your dad, like, did you grow up on a farm, or I don't know, did you have animals, or like,
Well,
do you remember when you really started getting into food?
yeah, my mom was a nurse and she worked nights, so she would be home during the day when she needed it. So I'd have to let her sleep. I tortured the poor woman, but I let her sleep. And I love to eat, so I would start cooking. I would, get on my bike and I would ride up to the grocery store and I would see how much money I had and I would buy some ingredients and I would come back and make lunch and then I would wake her up and she'd eat and then she was up for the day. So that was kind of how I got introduced to it. My father enjoyed cooking, but he didn't do it an awful lot.
Mm,
So I did get to see. My mother hated cooking, so
mm.
I never saw any passion from that. I remember as a child making her go into my elementary school to ask the women how they made spaghetti because her spaghetti was awful. And I actually made her go in and find out. So
That's
if you can imagine that going into the school lunch lady and asking for her.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Teach your mom.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel it. It's in some ways you're doing the same thing you are back when you were 9. You're going to the local markets.
yeah.
You're learning more about food. You're cooking delicious recipes and teaching people. You know.
Well, that's the important part. I did a recent news cast when the coronavirus started, and they're asking me about it. And I says, I just try to demystify it. I want people to see it's not rocket science. I mean, that's always one of my favorite sayings. And when I was teaching class, one of the most gratifying moments for me was I would always say, it's not rocket science. And I had 4 girls that went through 4 years of training with me. They would drop off and do other things in the school. And one of them is teaching one of the freshmen, and she went, "It's not rocket science." And I went, "Oh, that warmed my heart."
Yeah, like so many thoughts are coming up for me right now, but I totally hear you because your tiramisu is like 30 minutes. That shocked me. That
Yeah.
shocked me. I thought it was like, yeah.
Well, most people do. And again, it's learning basic techniques. And once you learn them, and I always, like my wife makes fun of me, all of my posts now have my mise en place set up. And I actually, with WordPress and Gutenberg blocks, I've actually copied the block so I don't have to write it again, and it'll always be the same. But that's, let's gather our ingredients. This is how we're going to make whatever it is. And chef speak, and she cracks her up that I say chef speak. It's called a mise en place, which in French is everything in its place. So getting your ingredients together makes the process go so much smoother and
I
faster.
did notice that at the beginning of every article, you have you take like there's like cups in a line.
Yeah.
There's like with the ingredients, and you take a vertical shot over it, and you're getting all the ingredients together.
Yeah, so people have an idea what goes in. I mean, sometimes there's 15 ingredients, sometimes there's 4. You shouldn't let that bother you because the amount of them, because sometimes it's just what you need for that specific thing. Doesn't mean it's difficult. It just has a lot more going on into it. Like
Yeah.
when I made my bolognese sauce, I mean that thing was full of ingredients, but
Hmm.
I made enough to freeze for about 6 meals. So that's something that you can do.
Yeah.
I had a guy in South Africa write me and says, "Oh my God, I didn't know you were supposed to let it cook for that long." He goes, "It was amazing." I says, "Yeah, I try to go 3 to 6 hours on the sauces." I says, "The longer you can go, the more flavor that sauce, like especially with marinara, with red sauce, it's not marinara at that point, but with red sauce, the flavors just build. And it's
Mm.
always better the next day because all the seasonings have had time to really get in there."
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and you've traveled like, I mean, where haven't you traveled? It seems like you've been every country pretty much by now,
We, you
trying
know, we have,
different
we've been
foods,
to,
going to different local markets.
yeah, we've been to 17 countries. We were going to add a couple more this summer before things, happen.
Yeah.
Italy's my favorite. Italy and actually Paris are my two favorite places. Any place in Italy and Paris, I just love.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was gonna, one of the questions I had was if you had to live in one city the rest of your life.
I had always thought it would be Paris. And then last year we went to Madrid and I fell in love with Madrid. My wife wasn't as fond of it. But for Madrid, in Paris is just it's Paris. But the people can be a little stuck up and snooty, and we are French. We can be this way. In Madrid, it was like everybody. They have a saying that says Madrid embraces you, and that could not be any closer to the truth. I mean, the people there were so warm, welcoming, and the one thing that I found was they looked just like us. They were speaking Spanish, but you're in the city and everybody looks like America. They look less European than any city I've been in.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah, and
So
it
it
was
seems like
just
a really friendly market. Another question I had was the friendliest local market, because I feel like my most recent guest, we were talking about food appreciation. And I feel like if you get to know the people when you talk to them and you kind of get to see the architecture from ancient, and then you eat that meal and it's like, oh,
yeah.
this is
Well,
something. It's.
well, one of the things the Europeans have, especially in Spain and in Italy and France, is they show you what the product looks like before it gets turned into something. So, like if you're going to the market and you go to the meat, you're going to see a chicken with its feet and its head on. You're going to see all the parts of the different animals. You're going to see more of what before they cut it up for you or you cut it up. You're going
Interesting.
to see what, rather than this, I didn't know that those chicken thighs came off of a chicken. Some kids have no idea where some of the food comes from.
Mhm.
They think there's a machine in the back pressing them out or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
so
like their
that,
connection to their food is more
yeah,
visceral and
yeah.
yeah.
And they eat a lot of seafood, so you see things moving. Some of the seafood's still alive, which it has to be if you're going to shellfish, if you're going to sell it. And or the fish are whole and and they'll clean them for you. But Europeans want to see, they want to look at the fish eyes to make sure they're not glassy or cloudy or that they still look vibrant, that the fish doesn't smell, it's fresh. You know,
Mm,
there's a
yeah.
lot more that goes into how they eat. And it's funny when we're in Europe, I eat more than I can humanly consume, pastries, pastas, and I lose weight
How is that?
because they don't screw with the food the way we do in the
Yeah.
United States. There's not
Yeah.
all these additives. There's no GMOs. There's no, it's just more natural. Plus, you tend to exercise a little bit more over there too. You walk more than we do here. It's just everything's in the car. There, it's around the corner. You walk to the market. I forgot something. I got to walk back to the market. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Sounds
and
like you might want to
considering
move there, but with COVID and everything, I mean, maybe that's a little bit, or whatever. But you go on a lot of like trips and tours, and what do you think about COVID? Like I know the cruise industry, for example, has been, shuttered or basically. Do you feel that it's going to be safe to reopen or reopen with, limited capacity?
I have never been a fan of large cruise ships. And we went on one large cruise when we first started traveling, and it was fine. It was nice. Everything was good, but we were on a ship eating and drinking, And I go, I can do that at home. You
Yeah.
know, of course, now I live in Florida, so people that are living in Wisconsin in January to be on a ship out in the sunshine is heaven. But for me, it's like, well, I got beaches everywhere. I don't need to do that. You know, I grew up at the seashore. I don't need to do that. I understand. Uh, it wasn't. It's about destinations for me. It's about getting off the ship, meeting people, talking to people, seeing things,
Mm-hmm.
and enjoying more communion with people when you eat. You know, food is very bonding.
Yeah.
It's we were in Germany, and I'm taking pictures of this amazing band that we just stumbled onto. I turn around and my wife's sitting at a table. I'm going, "What are you doing? You don't speak German." They didn't speak English because they called me over. It's like, and they're trying to converse. And we found out somebody was from Australia, so that saved us, and they spoke both. I'm like, she will just sit down with anybody and start talking to them, and while we're drinking and eating, you become friends. You bond,
Absolutely.
you know.
Are you introverted or extroverted?
If no one talks to me, I will lean against the wall and wait and then leave. If you come up to me and start talking to me and other people come over, I will talk until you get tired of hearing me.
Gotcha, because that's like the extrovert tendency. It's like I just imagine when you're cooking, it can be a very, quiet, experience where you're by yourself. So that just popped up into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, one restaurant I worked at, I actually wore when the Walkmans came out with for CDs. I was like, I had one inside my jacket and I had the headphones on, and I would zone because I would cook 200 to 400 dinners a night by myself. So I mean, I would zone. I would get the orders. I would zone. I would have you go in and you prep things and or get somebody else to help you, and just start cooking, and I would just go.
Go for it. Yeah, you mentioned you had 40 some odd years of white cloth restaurant experience. Is that just like basically restaurants with white cloth, or is that like a restaurant
Well,
chain?
no, white tablecloth is just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
more
Okay,
of
yeah.
a gourmet style restaurant, or a restaurant that doesn't serve fast food, basically in this day and age. You
So
know,
what motivated you to start your blog? I mean, I know it's communion, I know it's connection, but
well,
like 2009, that's I mean, I don't know. What drew you to the internet?
it was the beginning. I had not been super computer literate. My father was actually more computer literate than I was, and he kept saying, "Oh, you want a computer? I'll get you a computer." I'm like, I don't want that stuff. Uh, and it was amazing that he was so into it before I even knew anything about it. It was role reversal. But I was working. I worked at a school. I had one, and I would use it to type up my specials and to do things. And I would I learned to put my orders in on the computer. And other than that, in like AOL chat rooms, there wasn't a whole lot to do. So back then, so in 2009, I moved to a school, and I started. Well, actually, in 2005, I went to the school. In 2009, I decided to start a culinary program because when I had events, I would have to hire temps, and they were awful. They were like the dregs of the earth, alcoholics, drug addicts. You'd get one good one that would help, but the rest of them were from hunger. And I decided if, one girl had asked if she could help me. And I went, yeah, you can. So I put an apron on her and showed her how to cut. And we talked. And I went, oh, this is a good idea. So I started a program, and I had 60 girls sign up for it. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And out of the 60, 13 stayed. The rest just didn't have time to fit it into their schedule. So then they were all freshmen. So I had a team of freshmen, and we did a big event. And I wanted a place for them to go to get the recipes so I didn't have to work as hard. So I could just post them, and they could go and get the stuff, and they could try it, and they could message me and I could message back, kind of a thing. And none of them ever did, because they wanted to talk to me. They wanted to come in my office and see Dennis and see what was going on, and ask me personally. Some of the other students started going though, and some of the teachers started going. And that's kind of what got the blog rolling. And then I joined a group that was called Food Buzz out of San Francisco back in like 2010, I think it was. I found them and went to a couple of their conferences. and learned more about what it was I was doing, and met people from all over the world, and kind of revitalized my career and my love for food by seeing food from all over the world, which at that point you didn't have that kind of
Yeah.
close connection to it. Now I've got a friend in Singapore, I've got friends in the Philippines, I've got friends in Australia, I've got friends in Italy and Germany, and we're sharing recipes, and it's like, this is really cool. So that gave me a push. And at that point, then everybody, that was when the Pioneer Woman was big, and there was like a matriarchy of food bloggers. And
That's true.
it,
You're a guy in the food industry.
right, which was unusual, but they just, at the top, there was a top, it was like a top and there was a bottom. There was no in between at that
Yeah.
point. So and no one near the top would talk to you. You know, they'd let you take the picture, and then it was like, all right, peon, go away.
Yeah, like I could, I'm just imagining like Emerald Lagasse or whatever, like, celebrity chef and then, exclusive kind of.
Yeah, only I think with chefs, they're a little more down to earth.
Yeah.
But for someone that just became a food blogger and became like world famous because of it, and some of them were chefs before, I won't take it away from them, but I mean, and not that they're unskilled, it's just, it was a different rise to fame. A chef, if he's really good, should still have some humility, because he should not be afraid to go wash pots if he needs to.
And
Uh,
here you are talking to me. I love it.
oh, my pleasure.
It's funny how you went from, your dad teaching you the computer sort of to where you are today with like God knows how many followers. I mean, 2 million plus.
Well, it used to be 2 million. They closed Google Plus, and that zapped a million, 1.1 away. I
Dang.
know,
That's
I know. I
sad.
was
Holy
I was
crap.
sad that day, but I have close to a million left, which is fine.
Yeah.
And
Um, did that like, what was that like? I mean, how did that change your life? Did it happen, I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but like what's been the most surprising thing um about having a large audience of people?
well, you get people want to pay you a lot of money to do things. That's been the most surprising, and not in a bad way. You know,
Cool.
uh, I had one company when I first started come after me, and I'm like, well, I don't want to work for them. So I almost tripled my rate, and they went within 5 minutes. They answered fine, and I went, oh, I'm working for them. And every month I increased my rate, and they kept paying it, and they were happy as a clam, and I was happy. And that's when I found out that I had more value than I thought, because my first paying job was $75, and I was like, I can't believe someone wants to pay me. And we have a running joke now, and my wife doesn't like it, but I do. It's like, I don't put pants on for $75. It's like, that's not getting me out of the house.
Yeah.
Right. But it's been, the one thing, the amount of followers has, it gives you more leverage and what you can ask for. It gives you more opportunities.
Sure.
And I don't know, for me, it gives me more reasons to smile too, because people are sending me messages. I love getting these, I can't believe how good this was, the tiramisu. I would get, somebody, I remember someone from, was it Iceland or Norway or someone? My Italian grandfather was there. I made it for him, and he cried. I'm like,
Oh,
stuff like that is like,
yeah.
wow, yeah. When I get, yeah, it's nice to hear, this was so good. Everyone, my family loved it. When you get those kind of comments, those are really special.
I was just going to ask you what continues to drive you or motivate you today. And I'm assuming it's kind of this positive feedback and
Oh yeah,
joy that you see on people's faces and everything.
it's that, and it's, I always say, when I get up in the morning and I don't want to do it, it's over. Social media, cooking, whatever. I'll probably still cook, but when I get tired, when I wake up and it's not fun anymore, it's done. Just like I always, everybody has a day where they don't want to go to work, but for the most part, I never dreaded going to work. I never dreaded going into the kitchen. I may have been feeling crappy or not up for it. As soon as I put the jacket on and step on the floor and grab a knife, all my problems were gone.
Ah, I love hearing that.
I could forget, I could just put them away, forget about them. I could compartmentalize them so I didn't have to think about it and just do something that gave me pleasure that I
Huh.
could do well. When you do something, not to brag, but I did it really well.
Yeah, it's
Do
your
something
life. You know,
really.
they in those blue zones, there's this book about blue zones where they showed people that live a long time, and they came up with this like concept. It was basically life purpose, but the people that lived really long, they were engaged in their life purpose. It was like what people needed, what they were good
Yeah.
at, what gave them pleasure. And I just hear that so much talking to you.
Well, thank
It's cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
And
again, I like making sure people understand, like they say, oh, I could never make that. I'm like, well, yes, you can. Can you read? You can read. I remember I went to work at one restaurant and the chef goes to me, here, it was a new place. I had never, I hadn't been with the company very long. Can you read a recipe? I'm like, well, if I can't read a recipe, I'm in a whole lot of trouble. And he was like, I don't know what you can do. I'm not even bothering with you. And then when he tasted what I made, he was like, oh, wow, you're really good. I'm like, okay.
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
but sometimes you got to pay your dues and do that. But you could tell he wasn't as thrilled with what he was doing anymore. And
Yeah.
you can tell when someone's like that if they don't have the joy. I always tell people if you go into a restaurant and servers aren't happy, if they're not just having a great time, the food is not going to be that good.
Yeah.
Because if they're not happy, that means the kitchen isn't happy.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
kitchen isn't happy, then forget about it.
Yeah, like
I was
that
having a bad night, and the stuff would be okay, but it wouldn't be my best.
yeah, that whole connection to food.
Yeah.
And what do you, as we kind of wrap up today, what do you think the future holds for you? With COVID but also just like, are you drawn to different projects? Like, I don't know, or continue business as usual. It seems like you're loving what you do, and any idea
No,
what the future holds for you?
I think at this point in my life, I'm retired. And I remind people of that. And at this point in my life, I'm happy with the way things are going. I'm making more than I ever dreamed of making. I'm having a good time doing it. I've met a lot of really cool people. And the travel aspect of it that I kind of again, accidentally fell into um, because of
Why
that.
did you accidentally fall into that?
Well, I have a friend. We moved to Orlando 7 years ago, and I went to a function for bloggers, and I'm sitting there. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody. I'm sitting there and I'm tweeting because when you go to a function, you do your due diligence, you share it on social media, you talk about it, and I'm just working. I'm not paying. I'm listening, but I'm not paying attention. And I hear Chef Dennis here, and I look up and I see myself on the big screen at the front of the room. I went, oh, yeah, I'm here. And the woman was so in love with what I did as I was like one of the original live streamers. When Google Plus started, I was doing Google Hangouts, which people just hated. But and that was one of the things that brought me up through the ranks and escalated my value and got me more followers was Google Plus. I've done about 800 live videos that were difficult. We had a whole system. All right, I ran the first virtual conference on Google Plus. I had 11 sessions for food bloggers. We had a virtual cocktail party on Friday night. And then after that, people are going, oh my God, we can use this for conferences. Even Google, when I told them, they're going, you want to do what? I says, yeah, I want to have a conference. I'm going to have a virtual conference. They couldn't believe it. But it was like you go in, you do your stuff, you turn the computer off, you walk away from it, you come back, you restart the computer, you reboot Google Plus, you get everything working again. It was like, because if you try to do two in a row, it would freeze, this would
Uh-huh.
break, this could break. So we had a system for doing it, and it was hard. And then when we went to Facebook and it was so easy to do lives, I didn't want to do them anymore. Crazy, huh? All you do is push a button and that's it. I said, really? I'm like, oh man. So I let everybody else do it. So I taught it for a while. I spoke at conferences about live streaming and told them how to do it. And I did that and got everybody interested in it. And then just said, I don't want to bother anymore.
And then as we wrap up today, I'm going to go through and ask you just off the top of your head. No, don't need to go into too much of detail, but you got to pick one favorite breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Okay. Favorite breakfast. My mother used to make me refried beans, fried potatoes, and flour tortillas.
Mm,
Okay, for now it'll have to be huevos rancheros, but that was my favorite all-time breakfast. My favorite lunch, a Philly cheesesteak
mm,
with American cheese, fried onions, and mushrooms.
mm. Is it
Okay,
better in Philadelphia?
not necessarily, yeah, because of the bread,
What makes the bread special?
the water.
The
It's crazy,
water.
but the water. Actually, the Philadelphia bread is good. The Atlantic City bread is better.
What do you mean water? Like I'm imagining soggy bread right now, and I'm
No, though, you need bread is flour, yeast, salt,
ah.
and water. Okay, so the water that comes out of the tap that you're using, like in Italy, the water, just like French pastries, the water, Italy, the pasta, it's the water. We can buy the flour, we can buy everything else the same, but the
Huh.
water is different.
Interesting. Like it's more fresh or like not all this
It
crap in
just
it.
got it's got different minerals in it. It's got different properties in it.
Yeah.
And Atlantic City bread would get this nice, hard, crunchy exterior while it's
Mm,
still soft in the center.
mm,
So in Philadelphia, they use Amoroso rolls, which they think is the holy grail, but it's like white bread. You know,
uh,
it's like a roll made out of white bread. But the Atlantic City bread is nice and hard and crunchy. Now they have some wonderful bread in Philadelphia, like loaves, semolina loaves, and other things. But they don't put the cheesesteaks on good bread there. So
uh,
the cheesesteak,
uh,
okay. And then you said dinner. Dinner, well, that's a hard one.
yeah.
Um, I like lamb now. I never
What?
used to like lamb, and somewhere along the road, I learned the joy of lamb.
Huh.
And a good seared baby lamb chop,
Mm.
just seasoned in olive oil and salt and pepper, and seasoned with a little rosemary or something, is just wonderful. We were in Ireland, our first trip ever. I think that's when I really embraced lamb. And the Irish asked me to come over and they said, "We want you to come help dispel the myth the Irish don't know how to eat." And I was like, oh.
That is true. I have that stereotype in my head
Well, that's what I had. And I'm going, huh?
because like meat and potatoes or whatever, right? Or
Okay, I can do that. Okay. And I got there, and from the first meal to the last, it was like, oh my God. Because what we consider farm to table is dinner. That's
over
that's
there.
that's how they cook. They know
Yeah.
where everything came from. They know whose farm this came from. They're fresh. The products, I mean, this from Johnson's farm. These eggs came from here. These vegetables came. This cheese was made over here. Uh,
Mm. Yeah.
people and the seafood. So the lamb there says, I don't know what I'm because I didn't like lamb. So I don't know what I'm eating, but this is delicious. This meat is just delicious.
It's so interesting. Just one thing like that, I talk a lot about too is intuitive eating and helping people connect with their food. I can't really, not to close out this podcast on a sour note, but I really feel like Americans are kind of disconnected from their food.
Absolutely.
And I just hear that right now as you describe, the Irish connection to their food and
Yeah.
European. It's like we're missing something over here, man.
We are, the biggest the thing that screwed us all up here, and it's funny because it was always the best thing since sliced bread. But sliced bread was what killed the American food culture because when we had that convenience product, everything else followed.
Yeah. Eh, Yeah. From everything comes in plastic boxes and
But it's starting. There's more awareness. There's a
yeah.
great group of younger chefs. Like we had a real lull in culinary, I think, in the 80s and the 90s. It wasn't real good or productive, or it wasn't a lot of new, innovative things. The new chefs that are coming through really love food again. They love
Yeah.
local food. They love sourcing it, going out in the woods and finding, herbs and mushrooms. So I think it's coming back around to more of that kind
Have
of philosophy.
you I'm sure you've heard of Michael Pollan.
Oh
He
yeah,
used to be at least the face of that
yeah.
sort of, locally sourced. And even with COVID nowadays too, they're talking about building resilience into the supply chain, which basically means not just having a meat packing
Well,
facility, but getting foods from the local
if we went back to that, getting food would be a lot easier. I mean, thank God we have truckers that work like they do. I mean, that keep America fed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd be in trouble. But we need to learn some lessons from this. And I think I'm hoping more than just that I continue to get more traffic, but I'm hoping people see, since they've been forced to cook a lot now, that it's not hard, it's
Mm.
not difficult, and and look at how much money they're saving. I like to go out for meals too, I really do, but it gets expensive, and when at the end of the week, if you've got an extra 40 or $50 in your pocket because you cook dinner a few times instead of going out, that's a good thing. And that's money you can use to stimulate the economy in other ways. You can take trips, you can travel, you can, do something else.
What are the top 3 basic cooking skills someone should have? Like you mentioned, ooh, I'm blanking. You mentioned one earlier about just knowing how to for the tiramisu, there was some skill. If someone wanted to get started, oh, you said there was like basic things that if you just
Yeah.
learn basic things, what would be like the top few basic things you'd recommend someone to learn?
Well, the first thing is being comfortable with a knife and learning how to use it to cut properly. And again, you don't have to be super fast at it, but you have to find a knife. And people go out and spend $300 on a knife. Now I have severe carpal tunnel, so some days I hold a knife like that when things are really bad, which is really not. And I can still cut faster than most humans that way. um, but find a knife that feels good in your hand. I always tell people, don't spend all that kind of money. I mean, I don't have great knives. I've got some that are really good, and I buy a knife sharpener and I keep them sharp because a sharp knife is more important than an expensive knife.
Hmm.
If you've got $300 and you want a toy, that's fine because I've got toys in the kitchen. I really, you know, but I want to spend it on something that I'm going to get more pleasure out of. So learning how to cut. So learning how to cut, watch some videos. It's not hard. There's a few techniques and just how to cut different shapes, how to cut things a little better. So once you learn how to cut, then half the mystery is out of ingredients because you can measure things with a cup and a spoon. But the cutting part of it is where people go, "Oh, I can't. I just don't know what to do." You know,
Brilliant.
so the cutting and then sauteing, just start and saute and learning how to use a frying pan and the heat with that and the different way it reacts to meat.
Huh.
And then one of the important things with that is, people say we use wine. I don't use a lot of wine to cook with, but wine has an important thing. Like if I was sauteing a piece of beef or a chicken breast or something, when you dredge it in flour, seasoned flour, salt and pepper, that helps you build a sauce. It helps protect the meat. It helps add some flavor to the meat. So you do that, but then all this stuff sticks to the pan. Now, all those things that stick to the pan are full of flavor. So we take the wine, we hit the pan with the wine, and we deglaze the pan. We stop the cooking,
Hmm.
we deglaze the pan. So we've done a couple things, and that releases all the bits and lets you scrape the rest of the bits off the bottom of the pan. That adds all the flavor to a
Hmm.
saute dish, to a sauce.
Interesting.
So that's number two. So cutting, sauteing, and then just learning simplicity of seasonings and grilling or roasting meats. Because if you can do fish or you can do meats in the oven, you can cook anything then.
Huh.
If you need a really fancy, heavy sauce that's masking the flavor, ask yourself why. Because you're either masking the flavor because it doesn't taste good, it's bad, or you just think it belongs there, which is not necessarily true. Sauces are great, but if the piece of meat or fish doesn't taste good by itself, you're just fooling yourself.
Yeah. Um, Thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Um, okay. Let's wrap up with where people can find you. It's pretty much Ask Chef Dennis,
That's it.
like whether that's .com or pretty much every social media handle. You
Yep.
got great recipes.
Thank you.
They're beautiful. And I really encourage people to go connect with you
Thank you. I
because I
appreciate
can
that.
tell
Like
that
I said, it
you're a
should be
connector.
fun and easy. And the
Yeah,
more fun and easy it is, the more time you'll spend in the kitchen.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm more motivated right now too to like, I serious. I want to get out my frying pan and just like fry some stuff and pour
Yeah.
wine into some stuff and just play around.
Yeah. Well, that's half your sauce right there. You've got the stuff in it. You add a little wine to it. You put a little stock in it. You take some butter, roll it in flour, and that'll thicken it up a little bit. And easy peasy.
I love it. All right, let's see.